So good afternoon and welcome to the Visual Sound Smart Learning Suite Online for asynchronous learning.
This is STEM projects.
Actually, no, I'm doing it. Sorry, I'm reading off the wrong script here. Thank you for visiting us today. My name is Karen Moore, and I am the visual sound teacher on the education team. Our presenter today is Corey Freed. Corey is the visual sound education consultant. She is a former classroom teacher and both Google and Microsoft certified. Corey will be sharing some resources after the call, so please enter your email addresses in the chat box located on the right-hand side of the screen. Today's session is also being recorded. Thank you again for attending. And then also, if you have any questions and your audio is not coming through, Corey will let you know, and then you can put that question also in the chat box so that she can answer your question.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone.
With that, Corey.
Sorry. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. As Karen said, my name is Corey Freed. I did just mute all the microphones. If you need to come off mute to ask a question, feel free. It just does help reduce some of that feedback when people not in the conversation are muted. So today's presentation is STEM projects that you can do at home. And the goal of this presentation is to help you get some ideas of the type of things your students can do when they don't have robotic kits and 3D printers and all of these other technology objects that we kind of take for granted in the classrooms. So I want to start with this quote, and it's, if you get 25 of the same thing from students, it's not a project, it's a recipe. And the reason I want to start with this is because every student is going to have different materials at home. Every student is going to have different things available to them. And if you give them step-by-step directions, you might not get the project that you're hoping to get. So this is a really important concept, not even just for home projects, for school projects too. You want your students to be able to problem solve and trial and error, all those different things that just make the learning process better. So one of the biggest things that I recommend for STEM is journaling. And the reason I recommend journaling for any type of project is because it really does help the students track their thought process. It helps the students kind of come up with ideas. And I've also heard of situations in science fairs where a student's project might get destroyed the day before. And I could tell you the crazy stories I've heard, but we're going to skip those for now. And luckily, because they had their journal, they were able to at least recreate enough of the project to have a display for the judges. If your students are not that big on writing, video diaries are another option. If you haven't tried Flipgrid yet, I recommend it. It is a great site that lets your kids just talk to the camera. They can respond to each other, and it is FERPA following and all of those other privacy laws. So it is good for the classroom and for students. All right, so as we start to think about the type of projects kids can do at home, we need to think about what type of supplies they might have. This is not an all-inclusive list. I say that because every house is different. I also want to point out that some of the items that your students might have, your parents might not want them using right now. The paper towel tube is going to go in the garbage anyway. The paper towel, we all know how hard it is to find that in the stores right now. So when you're designing these projects or when you're giving students ideas, try to avoid things that are difficult in the current situations. Because on a normal, September project, you might be able to tell the kids to use spaghetti and marshmallows. Right now, they might not be able to find those in their household. Some of the other things I have listed just to show you is the bathtub versus a sink. There are floating projects and water projects and all different things that your students can do. And if you tell them to do it in the bathtub, it's not going to make as big of a mess as if they do it in the kitchen. So their parents might be a little happier to let them try designing a boat, for example, when it's not taking up the kitchen. So some of these items, again, are just ideas. They're not anything specifically to any project at this point. So as we get started, I want you to kind of take the role of the student and I want you to think outside the box. So I am going to set a timer for 1 minute and I want you to come up with as many possible ways that you can use an old hanger from the closet. Put them in the chat section, see what your peers are coming up with, but you have 1 minute. Come up with as many ideas of how to use an old hanger. All right, so I saw some great ideas in the chat. Somebody wrote bubbles, which is actually one of the pictures we have, and that's okay because we all know that you get ideas and you grow from those ideas. The person who wrote bubbles, you might want to ask your students, if you were to shape it as a square or as a heart, what would the bubble itself still look like? Because that's a good way to take one concept and expand it into more scientific thought processes. So we also have, let's see, let me scroll back up on the chat box. Somebody wrote use 4 to make 4-sided boundaries. So you can use the hangers to create geometrical shapes. You can make wired sculptures. That's a great one. Pick things up and grab them. Make a mobile of the planets. So you could see how something as simple as a hanger can become so many projects for your students. So that was kind of the point of this challenge, was just to show you that thinking outside the box and figuring out what kind of direction you can give your students. That very vague. All I said was, what can you use a hanger for? And look at these amazing things that you came up with. All right, so we're going to look at a website first that is called Design. And the reason why I like Design is because it is a really great site that allows your students to come up with ideas, and it allows you to come up with ideas. And I am going to give you the direct link to it in a second in the chat section. And the whole reason why I like this site is because, as you can see, it has a resync option that says new challenge. Every time you click this, you will get a new idea. Sometimes it has supplies listed, sometimes it doesn't. And that's kind of the whole point. So for example, right here it says use playing cards and wire to build a model of a train station. You give that project to your students, and now your students are thinking, well, how could I use playing cards and wire? Can I use tape? Can I use glue? Doesn't say if you can or can't. So this kind of just lets your students have these ideas that they might not otherwise be thinking about. Another option that this website had, invent a sustainable focused tool to rescue injured hikers. Again, it doesn't specify what items they can use. It doesn't specify, well, how is the hiker injured? Does he have a broken arm? Does he have a broken leg? Is he currently dangling from a rock climbing cliff and he can't find a grip to get up? So it lets the kids kind of have that freedom to come up with ideas. And this is really the main focus of STEM. The main focus is to let the kids use these problem-solving skills, these real-world situations, and not just have them read a textbook and regurgitate vocabulary to you. So I really do like the Sharpen Design website. They do have a specific section for STEM, as you can see. So if you were to go directly to sharpen.design, it's going to give you more collegiate problems. But if you go to the STEM section, it will have more elementary, middle school type of situations that your students might enjoy the challenges from, they might enjoy the projects of. And again, I just put 2 examples in this presentation. If you go to the website, I honestly do not know how many different options it has. I have yet to see something repeat though. All right, so the next site that I wanted to talk about is Stemfuse, which is actually one of Visual Sound's partners for curriculum. And the reason why I really do like Stemfuse is every project they have is STEM related, but they're not all science lessons. So for example, they have a project called Float the Boat. This is what I was talking about before, where your students might design a boat and float it in the bathtub. But it actually is not a science experiment about floating or weight distribution. The topic of the entire curriculum for that is propositions or prepositions. I apologize. I don't know why I pronounced that wrong. So the prepositions is the main focus of the lesson, but then it incorporates STEM by having them design boats. You also have a lesson on gravity. The plunging parachutes is one that we've all kind of seen. It's similar to the egg drop, but instead of dropping an egg and making a mess in their house, they're going to design parachutes and see which one has the most air distribution so that it falls the slowest, therefore protecting its cargo. Again, if you remember in the beginning slide where I said mention going outside, if your students can get out and get some fresh air during this, that is a great opportunity because they can design the parachutes in the house and then go in their backyard or go, wherever it's safe for them to be and test their parachutes out. Also, another project that would incorporate going outside, have them build a kite. I don't know if you've ever done that experiment before, but tell them to make a kite out of household items and get it to fly. Garbage bags, hangers, all of these things can be used. The last option I gave from Stemfuse as the example is potential and kinetic energy, Rube Goldberg machines. Again, when you go on to Stemfuse, it does give you a full curriculum around that project idea, but I just wanted to tell you the project idea itself because these are things kids can do at home. Rube Goldberg is built on that foundation of taking random items and making something kind of useless but fun at the same time. And that's what our kids need right now. Our students need to see that they can still do things. It's okay to fail, and they're going to just get a lot out of the process. Going back again to where I mentioned journaling, the process is where the learning is going to be taking place. So in the Stemfuse curriculum, just to show you if you did choose to use that, it gives you the teacher guide, and then it gives you different experiments and projects. So the STEM It Challenge is offline. This is what your students can do at home. If they have access to the computers, I know at the beginning of our conversation, we had been talking and one person mentioned that the school's currently distributing 900 laptops. So if your students are going to be having computers at home, there are coding projects that you can do with your students. You can't exactly have them 3D print stuff at home, but they can get on Tinkercad and design it. And that'll kind of give them that, I can't wait to get back to school feeling, because when they get back to school, they can print out their designs from these projects. So again, Stemfuse is a partner of Visual Sound. If you would like to know more about them, we can put you in touch with your sales rep. They can see what you want. There's elementary, there's high school. Oh, for coding projects, I was going to get into that in a bit. So I was right. My presentation itself is more of the offline stuff. However, since I did mention coding, don't apologize. That's why we have the text area for questions. So for coding, I would recommend a couple different options. You can go to the Google Computer Science program because they have a lot of great stuff for students. You could also go to code.org. I know most people think of code.org for Hour of Code, as you actually just mentioned in the chat box. However, code.org does have a lot more opportunities. There's also Workbench Education. In Workbench Education, you will find more I'm trying to think how to describe Workbench. Workbench has a little bit of everything. So if you've ever used Sam Labs or Microbits, Workbench Education actually has virtual versions of them so that your students can code without the robotic pieces. And on the side of the screen, they would see a simulation of what those pieces would do. So that way, if they get back to school and they want to actually try the Microbit or actually try the Sam Labs, their code is already written and they can just go in and attach the pieces through the Bluetooth and see what they did. So I do think Workbench is a good one. Yes, Microbits. Erin just mentioned Scratch and Scratch Junior also. Those are great resources for coding lessons that your students can do from home. The biggest disadvantage to coding at home is a lot of kids who are doing coding in school are doing something with a physical end to it. So they might be doing Ozbots or Microbits or Sam Labs or any of those type of products that they're not going to have in their house. So that's what I'm trying to, when I was creating this presentation for today's webinar, I was trying to give the resources that the students can use at home. So again, Scratch and Scratch Junior, definitely they can code those at home. They can definitely code, again, on Workbench, they can code Sam Labs and microbits. They just won't have the physical pieces to see their stuff in action. So there are definitely a lot of different coding things. In fact, as I mentioned at the beginning of today's presentation, well, before we started recording, I should say, I am looking at other webinars to create for teachers. I want to make sure that's things that you actually need, not just making the webinar for the sake of making it. Because I know the IUs and the school districts are doing a lot of webinars right now as well. But if you are interested in a specific one for teaching coding while the kids are at home, we could definitely put something together for you. I would love to, I enjoy coding. It's something I have fun doing. So I would love to bring that to all the teachers to give you some ideas that you can take back to your schools and to your students. Please keep the questions coming in the chat box. It definitely makes this whole process more entertaining and informative for you guys. All right. So the next project idea that I wanted to show you, and I put some pictures in here, is something that your kids are really able to do at home. And this is actually a great time to get them started on it. Indoor composting and gardening. It's amazing what type of things you can do in the house that would help save the parents from grocery shopping. Well, they're still going to have to grocery shop, obviously. But did you know that you can regrow scallions and celery with nothing but water? I have actually done it before. I have celery that I just cut a little bit off the celery once. K-cups. Coffee actually has a lot of nitrogen, which is a really good plant starter. So if you have seeds, you can recycle those old K-cups as starter plant growths. So these are just different ideas. And if you just say to your students, see if you can get a vegetable to regrow from the roots, again, it's amazing what kids can come up with. So I just saw another question. Is there a cost for Stemfuse? I believe there is a cost, but I think it's different depending on which Stemfuse you would like to be interested in. So that is definitely something you would have to follow up with the sales rep about. The next question is, how would you suggest students display their STEM projects, send pictures, make videos? That is actually a great question. I would say it depends on your students and you would know them best. If your students are the type that are really, they love doing like the TikTok and the Instagram and all that stuff, have them make you videos. Please be aware that social media might not be the best place to share those videos. So talk with your school's administration first, see what they recommend. Again, Flipgrid does meet FERPA, and that would be videos. If you are a G Suite school, you have Google Pages, and you also have Blogger. If you are a Microsoft school, you have Sway. So there are different options depending on what type of program your school is currently using that you can offer to your students as a potential place to journal. With the used coffee, I'm not quite sure what the beginning of that question was, but if you were asking about growing seeds from the used coffee, yes. So coffee grinds actually have nitrogen in them, which is what is in a lot of fertilizers. I do know if you go into Starbucks on a normal day, you could actually ask them for used coffee grinds for gardening. And a lot of people who have home gardens will sprinkle coffee on top of their plants when they transplant them from the starter planting to the garden. So that's why I had recommended the K-cups. It's a possibility. And again, this is let your students experiment. Have them go outside, get a little bit of dirt from the yard, put some seeds in one cup, then go put the coffee grinds, put seeds in that cup and see what makes the plants grow better. They might not have seeds at home to grow. So again, you have to know your students and know what they have access to. So the last thing that I want to talk about today is the best project that I think a STEM teacher can do with their students right now. And that's kind of let your students guide their own project. Genius hours and passion projects. You ask your students, give them the basic guidelines. Again, I gave you the example with the hangers. Give them something so open-ended that they're the ones coming up with the idea, because when they're passionate about what they're doing, they're going to be more engaged. Give them the process, teach them the scientific method, all of those pieces to it, but then let them do it. So I don't know how many of you have actually heard of the moonshot idea. This is where Genius Hour and Passion Projects came from. I do have a 3.5 minute video that I have linked on this presentation, as well as on the resources that I'm going to be providing you. However, because it is a YouTube video, I don't want to just sit here and show it to you. I'd rather you can go watch it on your own. That way we have more time to talk and such. However, it is a great video to show your students, have them watch and reflect. The nice thing about Moonshot Thinking is it comes from the idea of when JFK said, "We're going to the moon," we didn't have a spaceship invented at that point. We had cars. We just had airplanes that were not even that much of like passenger planes yet, you know, and he said, "We're going to the moon," not because it's easy, but because it's there. And that's the concept of moonshot thinking. Tell your students, don't think about limitations. Think about what you want and figure out how you can get it. And that's the point of the passion projects. That's the point of Genius Hour. It's to let your students figure out how they can change the world. And right now, more than ever, our students need to have that. They need to have that spark, because they're seeing the world at its worst and its best. They're seeing businesses shutting down and schools shutting down, but they're also seeing communities coming together. They're seeing people supporting healthcare and supporting and all of these amazing things. And that's kind of where this moonshot thinking comes from. It comes from that idea of don't think about what we have today, think about what we want tomorrow. So I really do recommend the moonshot thinking and the Genius Hour as a possible project to do with your students. So we have about 7 minutes left of the official webinar. I want to open this up to questions because I want to be able to support you all. I also have a few other ideas that you can do with your students that I can talk about if no questions pop up in the chat. So if I see questions, I will pop over and help with the questions. But what I want to kind of tell you about is if your students don't have the materials to make the project. So for example, if you tell your kids to make parachutes and they have no tissue paper or no plastic bags or no anything that could really be used to make a parachute, let them draw pictures of the parachutes and describe what materials they would use. The prototyping process doesn't have to be a physical building. It can just be the drawing and the diagramming and the blueprinting. So some other projects that you can do with your students when they're at home. You could have them think about ways to improve the schools. How can we better organize our school library so that students can use the resources? How can we automate morning announcements so that the principal doesn't have to do it every day? Maybe the students can come up with a proposal to do a TV studio and have morning announcements that way. This is really the time to get these students thinking about stuff. Some other projects you might want to do with them is the basic stuff, like have them create their own, I just drew a blank about what I was going to say. I'm thinking slingshot. There we go. I'm like if you saw my camera right now, you would have seen me kind of miming a slingshot and I couldn't think of the word. But have them design a way to transport materials across the 6-foot gap that we don't want to, be touching each other right now. We're talking about the social distancing. So how do we get stuff from point A to point B? All of these type of things are projects that your students can be doing and thinking about. Maybe connect your students in Pennsylvania with a school in California and have them brainstorm together. There are a lot of different communities on Facebook, on Twitter, that you as the teacher can connect with other teachers so that way you can connect your students in a safe environment. I'm not saying tell your students to go find a random kid from California, but you as the teacher can find that connection and bring the two classes together. We're now seeing how much Zoom and Skype and all of these web conferencing softwares are so handy. Cross the world, cross the country. Get your students to think outside the box. So if anyone does have questions, we have about 4 minutes left. I thank you all for your time. I hope that you got some good stuff out of this presentation, some good resources. I did post a link in the chat box for Bitly. It is a Bitly visual sound 31 or 031. That Bitly is all of the resources for all the webinars I have hosted so far. I am continuing to add to that. Someone just said, maybe we can make a Google Meet with another class on a smartboard. So obviously you don't have a smartboard in your house. And if you do, that is actually really, really cool. I would love to have a smartboard in my house. But yes, you can do Google Meets from different classrooms when you're back in the classroom. Oh, you meant when we go back. Okay. So, but yes, you can. So the thing is, if you are going to do that, you would need an external camera because the smartboard does not have a camera built in, or you could position your laptop in front of the smartboard. So there are definitely ways to do that. And we can talk about that a little bit more when you do go back to the classroom if you're interested in having those cross-school conversations.
No?
I just heard someone come off the microphone. If you have a question.
No, I'm sorry. I had to run away from the computer for a little emergency when you first started. Said something about giving an email, my email address.
Yes. So if you put your email address in the chat section, we are going to share off some resources. I did share the majority of them in that Bitly, and I will post the Bitly again in case you came in after, since I know you don't get previous messages in the chat section. Sorry, talk first.
I don't see the chat section on my screen. That's what.
Oh, okay. In the top right corner, you should see a little speech bubble.
I see my picture. I see the number of people.
And right next to it, you should see a little speech bubble.
I see a personage, but no, that's just showing the people.
You don't see you don't see the text box?
No.
Right next to the people.
Oh, all right. No, it just shows all the people. Sorry.
Okay. Well, click on the people.
Right.
And now once you click on the people, did the chat come up?
It says chat 1 on the right.
Yes, click on that.
All right. And now it's a green box.
Okay. Do you see the chat coming below it?
No, it's listing all the people. Again.
It's just still listing all the people?
Yes, there's nothing for me to write.
Okay, hang on one second. I am going to actually share my screen of my screen. So that way you can see it hopefully a little better.
Okay.
So if I flip my presentation mode.
If you just say your email address, I can also just take it down.
Okay.
Don't do that because it's in the recording then. Hang on one second. So do you see where I'm on my screen right now?
Yes.
And do you see on your screen a little chat box that looks like this? See how when I click it, it brings up the chat? And for those of you whose email addresses are showing, I will blur this out before we upload the recording. I do promise.
All right. Yes, I have the same as you right now on my computer.
So you're not seeing the text box?
I have a green chat box. That's all.
Okay.
And then if I highlight that.
You see what I just wrote? Did it pop up on yours?
No, it's just showing the questions people asked.
Right. So you're seeing the questions. If you scroll down to the bottom of it, you should see a send a message.
Okay, fine. Send a message. So I should put my email address there.
Yes.
Okay.
You found it now?
Yes, thank you.
You are very welcome. And again, for those of you whose email address is displayed when I just did that, I will blur them out before uploading this to YouTube. So this webinar as a whole will be uploaded to YouTube probably by the end of today. And when we do that, you will be able to view it. It will be added to our website that you saw the schedule on today, and it will also be added to the resource of that bit.ly that I shared. Any final questions before we sign off for today?
Just thank you very much. Really awesome job. Really helpful.
I'm glad. I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thank you.
All right, I am going to stop the recording now. However, I will stay in the room for a few more minutes if anyone has any final questions.
Hi, Corey. It's Devin. I just want to add that we are